In my entire life, only a handful of days have been so memorable that I can instantly recall their specific dates. June 5th, 2017 is one of them. For several months, like many others, I had been reading disturbing accounts in our local news about low test scores and poor graduation rates in our public schools. And I needed to find out for myself what was going on. So on that Monday morning, I visited a nearby elementary school. My first impressions as I walked the hallways were that things hadn't changed very much from the days when my own kids were in school. Classroom walls were papered with every manner of mat, chart, graph, table, and brilliantly colored drawings. Kids building science projects, reading, singing, playing, most of them fully engaged, but not all of them. However, as I was about to leave, making my way along the corridor with waves of little people surging by, the principal motioned me into her office. Now, it had been a long time since I had been summoned to the principal's office, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. As she closed the door behind her, I noticed that her smile was gone. We sat face to face across a small table, and she looked me in the eye and said, "Now that you've seen our school, let me tell you what life here is really like. The hardships our teachers deal with every day. 10% of our kids are homeless. 30% have had one or both parents incarcerated. 50% are on a watch list having experienced trauma in the last 12 months. I left the building, went back to my car, and sat there quietly as my eyes teared up. How could this be happening minutes from my home? In Manchester, New Hampshire, of all places, a city often celebrated among the best places to live in America. I couldn't reconcile what I had just been told with the way I had always pictured school, the way I think most of us pictured school, as places enlivened by happy, healthy kids, able and eager to learn. During the weeks that followed, this new picture of school was stuck in my head. A picture that now included troubled kids and frustrated teachers, a picture in which it was hard to see very much teaching and learning taking place. I knew I would have to do something, but what? I decided to begin by talking to friends, and was surprised to learn that many of them had also begun wondering about our schools. In fact, one had also started visiting schools and had begun meeting with a small group of local community business leaders to talk about their questions of school. This felt like a promising step toward actually doing something, so I asked if I could join in. We agreed from the start that our small group did not have the expertise or the authority to speak for the whole of Manchester. Insightful questions and answers of consequence, those that had any chance of leading to meaningful school improvements, would have to come from our local experts on kids and community, the people of Manchester themselves. But how could we convince them to engage in and want to do something about our schools? We needed a hook, a purpose that was both compelling and credible, something we all believed we could do. When we learned that our district's current strategic plan was about to expire, our mission became clear. Just suppose that we could bring the whole community together to create a shared vision of what we want our kids to know and be able to do. And then, guided by that vision, we forged a plan for the future of our schools, a plan by and for all of us. And so on another memorable date, May 14th, 2018, supported by more than 100 businesses and organizations, we proudly stood before our school board, asked them to be our partners in a community-based planning process, received their unanimous endorsement, and to our amazement, a standing ovation. Manchester Proud was born. Manchester's first ever citywide movement to design a comprehensive plan for the future of our schools. Since then, empowered by hundreds of volunteers, we have held nearly 400 meetings, interviews, listening sessions, visioning workshops, and town halls throughout the entire city. Thousands of voices have been heard, and our community planning group, led by parents, teachers, students, school leaders, and community representatives, is about to go public with its first draft of our plan. As I look back on our movement's remarkable progress, our work has been driven by two overarching questions. Why do our schools matter? Why should anybody care enough to do something about our schools? And what should our schools be? What should schools that are modeled for our success look like? Why do they matter? Because everyone who calls Manchester home is enriched by our public schools. For 28% of our population, the importance of schools is obvious. These are the employees of our district and our families with kids in school. For them, school is their kids, their jobs, their sports, huge part of their lives. Appreciating the importance of school to the remaining majority of the population takes just a bit more thought. Grossly oversimplified, this 72% can be divided into three groups: our employers, our workers, and our retirees. Without exception, every employer we spoke to required no convincing. Top of mind for them, the growing shortage of workers. Our chamber estimates that in our city of little more than 100,000 residents, there are currently 7,000 jobs unfilled. So in the face of this fierce worldwide competition, our employers realize that they need our schools to cultivate local talent and to attract global workers, workers who, by the way, will demand good schools for their families. Schools are the fuel of our economic engine. Our workers also want our local businesses to thrive. They want good jobs. And the skills they learn in our schools are essential to productive, rewarding careers. Schools pave the pathways to success. Although many of them have grandkids in our schools, the relevance of school to retirees may seem a little bit more remote, but they too are advantaged. Home is the greatest asset for many retirees, and the correlation between good schools and increased property values is absolutely proven. Additionally, during Manchester Proud's community engagement work, we heard loudly and clearly that our seniors are concerned about safety. And the correlation between education and crime is also firmly established. Case in point, 80% of male inmates in U.S. federal prisons do not have high school diplomas. Moreover, aren't we all advantaged by a more educated populace? One that makes better life choices, one that is informed and engaged in the work and culture and governance of our community. Our schools also matter because they are the very source of our future. We've all heard the expression, kids are the future, but we seldom pause to think about its literal truth. If the last human child were born today, the 300,000-year reign of Homo sapiens would end with our extinction in a mere 100 years or so. Our kids are as essential to our future as the sun that shines and the air we breathe. We will need their hard work and creativity to face new challenges as well as face the consequences of the problems we'll leave unsolved. For nearly 400 years, since 1635, with the nation's first schoolhouse nearby in Boston, our public schools are how we have chosen to prepare our kids for their future and ours. But during the most recent 50 of those 400 years, at a time when the world is changing at an accelerating pace, we haven't enabled our schools to keep up, to provide the learning opportunities and supports needed for all children to succeed. Today, more than 20% of our kids won't graduate from high school. And among those who do, 60% will not be proficient in reading, and 75% will not be proficient in math. And since we know that kids who don't graduate will suffer greater poverty, poorer health, and indeed shorter lives, we are condoning a tragic and inexcusable waste of future potential. We must do better. The upside for all of us is huge. We need our schools because the future we all want, a future where we all enjoy opportunities to be our very best selves, won't just happen for us. It needs to be made at school. I have one more Manchester Proud revelation I'd like to share with you. Perhaps the most profound insight into why our schools matter. And in it also lies the understanding needed to answer the second overarching question, what should our schools be? More than any other institution or organization, our public schools embody us, who we are as a people, as a community, with all of our strengths and weaknesses, our commonalities and differences. Our schools are us. Every day, we send 90% of our kids to public school as our representatives. And with them, they carry our burdens, and they can be heavy. Our poverty, hunger, homelessness, substance disorders, and all of the other challenges, sometimes traumas of life in the 21st century, all go to school. But as our kids pass through the doors of our school, they also bring with them the values and traditions upon which our country has been founded. Our willingness to work, our eagerness to learn, our desire for fairness, our hopes and dreams that together we can make tomorrow, our future, just a little bit better than today. This remarkable connection between us and school didn't happen by chance. Since that very first schoolhouse in 1635, we have intentionally embedded our public schools as the centers of more than 100,000 neighborhoods across the country, enabling our schools to engender our values, to build our character, to celebrate our cultures, to be us. And being us is what gives school its unique power and incredible potential. It is because our schools are us that they are the obvious and most opportune place to face and improve ourselves, to overcome our shortcomings, to leverage our abilities. Since that teary-eyed morning back in 2017, when I first decided something had to be done, the need to support our public schools has become ever more urgent. We are already nearly a quarter into the 21st century. I have seen firsthand the dedication of our school leaders and teachers to serve our kids against considerable odds. And they can no longer do this job alone. Now is the time for all of us to realize that our schools really do matter to all of us, and they are our shared responsibility. It's time to erase those old misinformed pictures in our heads and replace them with new visions of what our schools should be. Visions that directly align the missions of our schools with our needs and aspirations as a community. So, what should our schools be? Imagine with me for just a moment schools that deliver learning opportunities for all of our kids, both basic knowledge and the new skills they'll need to solve problems not yet imagined. Schools that ignite the passions in our kids and inspire them to become tomorrow's doers, builders, creators, caregivers, teachers, technicians, and leaders. Schools that provide the supports so many of our kids need to overcome life's challenges and make their own brighter futures. Schools that are founded on trust, inclusivity, equity, and respect, that are incubators of civility that can remind us all how to get along again. I now get it. It's so clear to me that the fate of our kids, our community, our future is directly tied to the performance of our public schools. Making the improvement of our schools the most important work we can and must do as a community. It's time for us all to be Manchester proud. Together, we will make our schools great. Thank you.